Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sean Driscoll, and I'm the Director of Public Relations at Legal Aid of North Carolina. We have a very special presentation for you today. Sarah Caraffa, an attorney in our Raleigh office, is going to talk with us about the Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child abduction. This is a very specialized area of law that has to do with returning children who have been kidnapped by a parent outside of their home country or kidnapped by a parent in their country and taken to another country. During Sarah's presentation, if you have any questions for her, please put them in the Facebook comments and we will try to answer them. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Sean. All right, so Sean has given a good summary and I want to get into a little bit more detail so that if you believe that this may apply to you, you know the direction that you need to go in to get further assistance. So let's start with, what is this? It is the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction. The Hague Convention is a treaty that involves upwards of 100 countries across the world and all sorts of different areas of law that they have all come together and agreed to do similarly. Okay, so international child abduction is one of those areas of law. And what it is meant to do is to protect children from being taken to another country and the left behind parent not being able to access that child anymore. So these 100 or so countries have all agreed to a certain way of bringing this case to court so that the parents, both parents on either side of the border, can get a fast resolution and determine where the child should be. What is it not? This case is not something that deals at all with the immigration status of either parent or the child. It is largely not something that is going to be considered by the judges in the courtroom. Children may come here as citizens of the United States with a parent who's a citizen. They may be quite the opposite, not a citizen with no status, with a parent that has no status. That is not something that heavily comes into play in these cases. And the outcome of these cases aren't going to change the status of the parent or the child's immigration. The other thing that this isn't is it is not a custody case. It is the first step before a custody case is filed. And we're going to go into a few hypotheticals to give you more clarification. But if a child is brought to the United States and there's a parent left behind in the other country, the courthouse in the United States is going to decide which country should hear custody. It's not going to decide which parent is the better parent or where the child would be most happy. It is strictly deciding whether the home country or the United States is the proper place to bring a custody case, should one be brought. And that is the long and the short of it completely. Okay, so as I said, 100 or so countries participate. There's a very long list that you can find right here under the State Department website for the United States. Some countries that we work with closely that apply this treaty include Mexico, Canada, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So Legal Aid of North Carolina works with quite a few folks from all of these countries. And I can personally say that in the cases that I've taken, they have come from these particular countries. And that is where the dispute has started. And then a child has been taken here to the United States and we have the parents fighting over where the child should remain. So if you are wondering whether your country of origin or the home country of the child is a part of this treaty, please take a look. There's a lot of information on this website and quite a few countries are involved. If your country is not involved, that's another question to speak to an attorney about. And there are plenty that are not members of the treaty. Okay, so let's go through some hypotheticals so I can flesh out whether this might apply to you. So in these scenarios, you are a parent and your child has been taken to the United States and you are not consenting to the child being taken. Example 1, you have lived with your child in Honduras for 8 years now. Your ex lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and has done so for the last 8 years. Maybe they haven't even come down to visit you, okay? You decide to send your son up to see his other parents in North Carolina, and you agree for the child to stay for just 1 month. He is supposed to return on July 1st, but your ex decides not to put him on the plane, and he withholds him and keeps him in the United States in North Carolina and refuses to send him back to you in Honduras. Okay, this is one instance where the Hague Convention would apply and where you could seek further assistance from your government. I'm going to walk you through that in just a moment in the next slide, but let me give you another example, okay? What if both you and your ex are separated and you live in Honduras and you share custody of your son? And your son goes back and forth between 2 homes, and it's always been easy and reasonable. But one day you go to pick up your son from school and he is not there, and you learn through family members shortly after that your spouse or your ex-spouse has moved to the United States and is not intending to return. How do you ask a court to get your child back? All right, there are 3 things that the court needs to hear from you in order to start a case. The first one is that Honduras has been your child's home country for most of his life. This wasn't a 6-month stay. This was intended for your son to grow up there. He's been in school. He has after-school activities. You have family there. This is where your child is at home. The second element that a court is going to want to hear from you about is that under the laws of Honduras, you have rights to your child. Even if you don't have a custody decision in your country of origin, your country still recognizes that you, as the parent, have a right to share in custody and see your child and make decisions about your child, okay? That's element 2. And element 3 is that you've been exercising custody of your child. You've been visiting with your son. You get him 5 days out of each week. Even if you don't, even if you're just engaging with your son on a more limited basis, maybe you see him a few days out of each month and you otherwise send money to the other parent. That is enough to show that you are exercising your custody rights to your child prior to your child being taken to the United States. Okay, so these are the 3 things that any court is going to look for. So what do you do if you are the parent who has been left behind? If you are, what you have to do is identify your country's central authority, and that means go into a government building and ask them about the Hague Convention. Each country is going to have a different central authority. It's just a general term. But all of the higher government offices are going to recognize this if they're members of the treaty. And they will get you heading in the right direction. And what their job is to do is to help you complete an application. It's about 20 pages. It's a form in which you write down the reasons why you believe this particular area of law applies to you, where you believe your child has been taken, who they are with, maybe some pictures of them. The application asks you to write down what has happened and when the child was removed from your care and custody. And then asks you to sign and document everything. Oftentimes you may add a birth certificate if one exists that you have, maybe your child's passport or identification from the country that you were residing in. And what the central authority does, and in this scenario, it would be Honduras, the Honduran Central Authority is going to take that application, it's going to send it to the US government. And it goes specifically to the United States Department of State. This is the prong of our federal government that handles these type of cases. And they have an entire section that deals with this specifically. And the two countries talk. The Department of State in the US is then tasked with finding a program in the area where you believe your child has been taken, who would be able to review your case, interview you, and talk about possibly filing an action in court to get your son returned, okay? And we are that program. We are one of many in North Carolina that is capable of taking these types of cases, reviewing the applications of the parent that has been left behind, interviewing, and potentially filing a lawsuit in court on their behalf. So the US State Department acts quickly, sends the information to us, and once we have reviewed everything and spoken to the left behind parent, then we will figure out how and the best way to file an action in court. None of this requires the left behind parent to actually be here. Most of this is done online, over the phone, with interpreters. All of that is perfectly fine, and that is all I know. That's all I've ever done. The left behind parent doesn't even have to come for court. They simply have to be able to show up on video screen, because many times the left behind parent isn't able to get a visa to come to the United States. That is something that the courts understand. The one takeaway from all of this is if you believe that your child has been taken, you need to act fast. Within 1 year, you need to be able to file an application, and the government here needs to be able to identify a program that can help you. After 365 days have gone by, it becomes harder to get your child back. And so if you know the child has been taken, I would act as quickly as possible. Go straight to the central authority, start having those conversations with your local government and filling out the application so that we can review everything and figure out if we can help. Okay, here's the second scenario, our second set of scenarios. You yourself have fled to the United States because you were trying to escape domestic violence with your child. Okay, so the hypothetical in this instance is that you are living and residing in Mexico, you're married, you have 2 children, but your spouse has been physically and sexually abusing you for quite some time, and now they are turning and physically abusing your children. So you decide that it is better for you to cross the border and come into the United States to live with family in Greensboro, North Carolina. So you leave your home and you don't tell your spouse because you're fearful for your safety. And you try and gain freedom and safety here in Greensboro, okay? Under these circumstances, your spouse is the left behind parent, and they have the ability to do the same thing that I was describing previously, and that is to go to their central authority and file an application and see if they can get assistance. Okay, and so the State Department would contact legal aid, for instance, in Greensboro, North Carolina, and say, can you help this left behind parent? Legal aid is also allowed to take parents who are fleeing to the United States to get away from domestic violence. That is one of our priorities, one of the populations that we focus on assisting. And we can also review cases by people who do not want to return their child to the country where they have been residing. So we are able to do both sides, both left behind parents who would like their child returned, as well as parents here who would like to have their children remain with them because they're fearful for their safety. Okay, you will know, as the parent who has come to the US, you will know if the left behind parent has filed something, if a sheriff comes and serves you with paperwork. It will be very specific, and it will describe the Hague Convention and the reasons why a lawsuit has been filed. In this instance, if you are served with this type of paperwork, again, I would strongly encourage you to immediately speak to an attorney, at the very least, about your rights and ways that you might avoid having to have the child returned to Mexico in this situation. And again, Legal Aid of North Carolina is one organization that you could come to discuss this. The State Department typically, I do not believe, sends us information about people that have come to the United States. The Department of State only receives applications from a left behind parent and sends us that information. So in the event that this is a scenario that's familiar to you, you would need to come to us and give us a call or speak to other attorneys. There's quite a few attorneys in the state that do this type of law. And you can find them through online by simply Googling Hague Convention, as well as a lot of different family law attorneys who are familiar with this area. Okay, so if you are the parent that has crossed the US border and wants to stay here because you are worried about the safety of your child or yourself, there are a handful of defenses that you can assert if you do not want to return, or you do not want to return your child back to Mexico. So I just want to briefly talk about them, and I'm going to try and water them down to make them easily digestible. The first is essentially the scenario we've talked about. It's too dangerous for your child to return to Mexico because they're starting to be abused, or they have been abused by the parent that's been left behind, and they will continue to be abused if they are sent back. This also applies if you are the victim of abuse and it has been incredibly serious and the children have simply witnessed it. It's more challenging, but a court may decide to keep the children here if you are able to show that it was too dangerous for you, even if they haven't been harmed specifically or physically, okay? Another defense is if your country is at war. I would say right now, Syria, for instance, might be a place where you wouldn't want to return a child because the country is in the midst of war and it's extremely dangerous. This is another defense to having to return a child to their home country. Third, if you and your child have already been here for 366 days or more, you're allowed to say, we're already settled here in the United States. It's been a long time. This left behind parent is too late. They have filed this petition 2 years from the date we left. And now my child is thriving here in the United States and shouldn't have to just go back to Mexico and be uprooted again and sent to another location. Okay, that is another one of your defenses. So if you're getting a knock on the door from a sheriff and it's been years since you left, this is an important defense that you want to talk to an attorney about and assert if this case ends up in front of a judge. Another defense, what if you have proof that you and your spouse or the parent of the child always intended for the United States to be where your child grew up or your children grew up? If it was never intended that Mexico would be where the children grew up, and you have the ability to show that through all sorts of types of evidence, that the two of you agreed for this to happen, for you to come to the US and stay in Greensboro, that would also be a defense. So if you have text messages from the parent who is still living in Mexico saying, I think that this is a good idea, please sign up the children for school here, let me know how they're doing, and then you don't hear from them for years, this is a great defense to having to return the children back to Mexico. And actually, that was the last one. Mexico is not actually the children's home. If you've been going back and forth between the two countries and you think that maybe Mexico has been where the children have been staying for an extended period of time, but they also have residency here in the United States, this is another way to defend against having to return them. Okay, so what are your next steps if you are the parent who has fled to the United States. You need to be watching out for if the left behind parent has filed an application. You will receive information on that. You're required to have notice of that. The court can't move forward if you are not actually noticed and told that something has been filed. You have to be properly served. This is generally done by a sheriff. So if the left behind parent has filed a petition in a court here to return the child, you're going to know about it. Importantly, you're allowed to also file a response. And in this response, you can talk about any of these defenses that we've just reviewed. The attorneys who may be assisting you in filing your response should be knowledgeable of these defenses and will be able to help you in writing these defenses out in the form of a response to the request to send the children home. Again, domestic violence is one very good reason to respond to these actions and to protect your children from having to be sent back to Mexico. So if you have been served with this action, I want you to please call a local attorney just to at least get a consult and to talk through what your options are. Once a petition has been filed in court somewhere in North Carolina, the process is very fast. The rules say that the court needs to move in about 6 weeks' time to get you in front of a judge. It's not always perfect. It has not been perfect since COVID-19 started, but it is a fast process, and it's a fast process for a good reason. They want the children to be returned promptly if that is the right decision for the left behind parent, and they want the children to be allowed to settle in the US if the US is the proper place for the children to reside. And so even if it's filed in a federal court, these cases move swiftly. And that is a part of the treaty, and it is an important part of protecting children who may have been taken. So where can you get more information? We are fully operational here at Legal Aid of North Carolina. We have an intake line below, as you can see, as well as a website. If you believe this applies to you, any of these hypotheticals or something similar, please feel free to call our intake line or check out our website. And I believe we will be doing more Facebook Live regarding this. So if you have other questions, please reach out to us. And Sean, if there's any other emails, anything else that they could do. But that is it.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I did note that if you watch this video as a recording, please, you can also put questions in the comments, and I will be monitoring them, and we'll try to get answers to those questions.
Great.
There are no questions in the comments now, but I have a question for you, Sarah.
Yes.
Let's say I'm sitting in Mexico, and I'm thinking, man, I think this applies to me. I think, you know, my ex has taken my kid and I'm to the US, and I'm worried that, you know, this is a kidnapping situation that's covered by the Hague Convention. What is the first thing I should do? My first step?
Run to the local authorities and the local government and tell them about the situation and ask for an application under the Hague Convention.
So would that be the,
know this? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, would that be that country's equivalent of the US State Department, or is it some other part of the government they should go to?
That's a great question. In Mexico, each of the Mexican states, the states in within the country, has their own local government that can file this application and send it to the State Department. I do not know the names of the government entities, unfortunately, and they're different in every country. But you want something that's federally based that can have communication with the United States government.
That's really helpful. So your first step is to start in your home country, not the US. Don't start with the US, start in your home country.
So,
That's
and
really
once you get that application filed, it should be getting sent to the US promptly.
Great. Speaking of promptness, I know you mentioned that it's really important to act fast. And I wonder if you could just reiterate, since that seems like a really important part of this, if you could just reiterate the timeline.
So you first file an application. It is sent to the State Department, and the State Department identifies local resources, okay? And those local resources, one being Legal Aid of North Carolina, will call you and talk to you. If Legal Aid of North Carolina believes that this convention applies, then we are required to file a petition in the court on your behalf within 1 year of the child being taken. So if the child is taken on September 1st of 2020, we have up until the end of August of 2021 to get that petition filed, to start that lawsuit and ask a court to consider the case. So in that time, you have to file the application. It has to go to the State Department. It has to come to us, and we have to investigate the case. There's a lot that has to happen, and 1 year can move very fast. Legal Aid of North Carolina is cognizant of that deadline. So if we believe that we have a case and we need to get it preserved and make sure that we're inside the 1 year, we will act very quickly. But we also need the parent to act quickly, because if they wait until 1 month before that 1 year deadline, it's going to be a lot harder to get from them to the State Department to us to the courthouse. Is that good?
Great. So yes, in short, you have about a year, but this is not a quick process. So don't wait until the last minute. So act fast, act today, act very quickly.
Yes.
Great. Well, I think that's it. No other questions have come in through the comments. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us today and talking about this. This has been great. This is not, I think it's safe to say, is not a very well-known area of law. So it's great to get some information out there. And thank you to everyone who joined us on Facebook today. I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. If you're watching this as a recording, still feel free to put questions in the comments and we will get answers to them. And as always, if you need legal help with this or any other civil legal issue, you can call our toll-free helpline at 1-866-219-5262 or visit our website at legalaidnc.org.